All right, good morning, everybody. Time to start our meeting, and welcome to the May 9th meeting of the Planning Commission. If you would all please stand and join with me in the salute of the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Sue, would you do a roll call for us, please?
Mr. Cannon.
Here.
Mr. Herzog.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Nader.
Here.
Mr. Sevison.
Here.
Mr. Moss.
Here.
Thank you.
Now, a report from Planning Director, EJ.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. EJ Valdi with Planning Services Division. Welcome back, Commissioner Sevison.
Good to be back.
All right. So just normal business, board meetings that have occurred since we last met. The board had met a couple times, April 22nd in Auburn and April 23rd. If you remember, that was when they were going to hear the first round of general plan amendments that were coming their way. So as recommended by your commission, the board approved 3 of the projects, Alpine Sierra Subdivision, the White Hawk 2 project, and then also the Placer County Government Center Master Plan. All as I don't think there were any changes to any of the parameters of either project or any of the projects. So the board meeting is next meeting on Tuesday, the 14th. There's a number of things on that agenda. They're going to be considering the Regional University Specific Plan Amendment, the 7-seaters parcel map modification appeal, second round of zoning text amendments. This one's going to include some changes to the definitions, the building height measurement, extensions of time, and then the code compliance enforcement changes to streamline the nuisance abatement processes. These are all items that you have recommended approval of, and that's what we're carrying forward. We've just broken it down to smaller sections, and that's why this is going to be the second round that goes to the board. CEDRA will also be presenting findings of the Housing Stakeholders Committee. I believe that will be presented by our agency director and Shauna Purvines. And then they're also going to be doing a presentation on to the board on e-services. And what that is all the new online application submittals that we're doing, appointment scheduling, Alexa voice interaction and things like that. What I'd probably like to do is bring that before your commission at an upcoming meeting, just kind of give you an overview and a demonstration of exactly what all that is. But they will be doing that at the board next week. So for Planning Commission meeting, you guys got a month off. So now you're going to get hit hard with hopefully 3 meetings starting today, this month. The next meeting is scheduled for May 23rd. That's going to be here in Auburn. And we have an informational item on the countywide Parks and Trails Master Plan that our Parks Division is going to be bringing forward. We have a Westwood Family Cellars. It's a winery that you'll be considering. One of the items today, we are hoping to continue to that meeting as well. And then we also are bringing forward the draft EIR for the winery and brewery ordinance. So I would expect a pretty good turnout for that. That's where we'll accept comments on the draft EIR for that ordinance. And then on your consent agenda, we're going to be asking for a special meeting on May 30th. And that's so we can go up to Tahoe to consider the base-to-base gondola. And of course, that's the gondola that's going to connect Squaw Valley to Alpine Meadows. And then I think that will be it for May, and then we'll start up all over in June again. So that's my report. If there's any questions? We're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now would be the time for public comment. These would be comments on any items that are not on the agenda today. Is there anybody who would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to, I believe, the consent agenda. There's 3 items on the consent agenda. I believe we've had a request to pull one of those, which would be the the Greyhawk subdivision extension. So we'll remove that from the
Yeah,
agenda.
Chairman, staff would like to pull off item C, which is the Greyhawk 3 extension of time, so we can move forward with the other two items on that consent agenda.
Okay, so we have two items on the agenda, and I think because of commissioner attendance, we need to split those up. We have, one would be the approval of the new meeting schedule. Okay.
Second.
Motion second, roll call?
Okay, Mr. Cannon,
Yes.
Mr. Herzog,
Abstain.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Nader,
Yes.
Mr. Sevison, Mr. Moss,
Yes.
and that was a first and a second with Mr. Nader and Mr. Cannon. Thank you.
The next would be the modified planning commission meeting schedule with, including the extra meeting in Tahoe.
I move that we approve the revised schedule for 2019, adding May 30th to our schedule.
Second.
Motion and a second, roll call please, Sue.
That was a first and a second with Mr. Nader and Mr. Cannon, and a vote from Mr. Cannon, please.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Nader,
Yes.
Mr. Sevison,
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Thank you.
We will. Do we want to, question Edie, do we want to go ahead and deal with Greyhawk now and then go on to item one? Or do we want to continue item one and then, or does it matter?
I think the best move is to go with Greyhawk now and then go
Okay.
with the regular items.
All right.
Is a request from Paterson Properties to extend approvals of the Greyhawk 3 subdivision in Granite Bay. The project is located at the northeast corner of Sierra College Boulevard and Eureka Road. It's a 20.5 acre parcel with two parcels. A western portion zoned CPD, so commercial plan development with combining design, scenic corridor, and the eastern portion, residential single family, combining building site of minimum 18,000 square feet with a combining district of planned residential development of 2.8 acres. So the project was originally approved in June of 2016 by the Board of Supervisors. At that time, they did rezone the eastern portion of the property, approved a tentative subdivision map, and also approved a conditional use permit to allow the multifamily housing on the western portion and a planned residential development on the western or eastern portion. So I can give you an overview. Project location. West parcel, east parcel, commercial zoning on the west, detached residential on the east. A couple project pictures. This is open space area looking towards Strap Ravine on the northern end of the site. And this is along Eureka Road looking towards Sierra College Boulevard in the distance. The approved project is 22 duplex units on the western portion for 44 units, and then 28 detached residential dwellings on the east. It was approved by the Planning Commission in April 2016, Board of Supervisors in June of 2016. Current expiration date is next month, June 7th. Pending your approval, the new expiration date would be June 7th of 2021. We did receive a fair amount of comment from the public questioning the mitigated negative declaration that was approved back in 2016. Issues with drainage. I'll just point out that the drainage issues have been addressed. There was a maintenance problem along Surrey College Boulevard. Some of the pipes were partially blocked, causing flooding on Eureka Road. And then some issues with some comments about the traffic study that was approved or completed at the time. And Stephanie Holloway is here from Public Works and can address traffic in a general sense.
Good morning, Commissioners. Stephanie Holloway with the Department of Public Works. As Chris said, we did receive some comments, concerns over the traffic study and related to the date of the original study and the MND that was processed. As many of you know, we are in the process of updating our traffic model for Granite Bay, as well as potentially making some revisions to the circulation element of the community plan. A new cumulative study and a new traffic analysis has been performed since the Greyhawk 3 project approval, and the comments that we received really were related to the traffic study that was done with the original MND data taken in 2015 and the new traffic study, the new traffic model from 2017, that those numbers under existing conditions don't appear to be the same. And so just to kind of explain that a little bit, obviously the passage of a couple of years, traffic in Granite Bay has over the years been increasing, and so 2 years of additional traffic may result in a change in our level of service findings between the two studies. And then also, just to kind of reiterate that the new traffic model and the new traffic findings basically create a situation where we can't compare the existing traffic that was determined in the MND to the new existing from the new traffic study, because 2 years have passed. I think some of the comments were really related to the fact that maybe there might be some flaws in the original study because those two traffic numbers don't align. And so just to kind of, inform you that, traffic, the historical traffic that we've seen over the years, does result in some increases. I think that is really the discrepancy that we've seen between the two numbers, the 2015 numbers with the original approval and the new traffic study and the new numbers. So just kind of wanted to bring that to your attention and say that it's not really an apples to apples comparison here. And that work in Granite Bay does continue to evolve, and we're working with the community on some solutions there. Any questions for me?
Stephanie,
Yeah.
With the new numbers now, would it have made any difference if we were approving the project today from the staff's viewpoint?
It's hard to say because the analysis was really performed based on the traffic projections from the 2015 study. So, essentially to compare this project to today's conditions and the new traffic model would really take a new study, a new evaluation to say whether it was significant today. We do know that back then it was determined to not be significant.
Right.
So we'd almost have to go back and sort of reevaluate that. But again, no change really has resulted in this project. No change in circumstances on the property has resulted with this extension of time proposal.
So if you overlay what the proposed traffic implications of this project are on the new numbers, you're not saying that you can determine that it's less than significant still today.
Right. I mean, what we found with the new study, there are areas that we are projecting beyond some of the level of service standards in the community today. There obviously are additional mitigation and CIP improvements that will result in fixing some of those improvements. Our long-range forecast does show that there are some violations of our level service standard that we are working with the community to come up with solutions. So if we were to take the Greyhawk proposal, had it been submitted today and done an analysis, It's hard to say whether that increase would be substantial enough to find that it's significant. I will say, just kind of in a brief staff review of the project in relation to that, it may fall under our methodology of assessment, where that additional traffic on top of an area that may be below our standard may still find that it's less than significant. So it may be small enough that we still would have the same finding. But again, unless we did a reevaluation on today's numbers, had the project been submitted today, it's hard to know.
Thank you.
Commissioners, if I may, just to kind of touch on that point, to the extent that there are arguments that traffic levels have increased in the area since the initial project approvals, those are arguments that the environment is impacting the project as opposed to the project impacting the environment. And the 2015 Supreme Court case of California Building Industry Association, based on that ruling, those changes are outside of CEQA, because you're supposed to determine the project's impact on the environment, not the impact of the environment on the project. And just one other thing to kind of go through here as you evaluate this item. The project itself was approved in 2016. Today's item is not to reevaluate the merits of the project or weigh the pros and cons. It's a much narrower review, and that's determined whether there's been a change in circumstances that would have been grounds for denying the project originally. Which means that your question, the things that you're going to have to grapple with are whether there was anything that would have caused this not to have been approved the first time around, or whether there's been a change that would have meant the original approvals shouldn't have occurred. Under CEQA, since a mitigated negative declaration was already approved for this project, the inquiry is to see if there have been modifications to the project that require additional environmental review of the project itself. Since all that's requested here is an extension of time, there aren't any changes to the project itself. So there isn't another layer of environmental review that's needed. Some of the comments have touched on this concern about being new information. And there is a section in CEQA that talks about new information. And that is, new information under CEQA requires that the information not only not be known at the time of the original approvals, but also that it could not have been ascertained either. And when I went through the comments, specifically the ones dealing with traffic, I noticed in one that was written by Shannon Quinn, May 6, which I believe the commissioners have, she states, and I'm just quoting from her letter, "Prior to approval of this project several years ago, I came before this board and urged you not to approve this project based on flawed traffic data. I submitted numerous pages in relation to the erroneous data." So that comment by itself acknowledges that these concerns over the traffic, they were raised at the time of the initial decision, so those would not be kind of, quote, new information under CEQA. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you.
My question has to do with 2015 and the original. Can you just confirm for me that everything was done appropriately and to appropriate policy and practice with that original study?
Yeah, so in 2015, the project applicant hired a traffic consultant to prepare that traffic analysis. The county reviewed that under our policy at that time. At that time, the traffic model that we used to perform the study was the most current tool that we had that Placer County had to evaluate the traffic. So we determined that there was less than significant with the project, and the M&D was processed. So subsequent to that, the traffic model has been updated, and I think that's the discrepancy here. Is we used the best available tool that we had at the time in 2015. Since that time, traffic has evolved. We've also have a new tool that we're using to determine today's existing. Yes, 2015 existing, that was what we processed with the M&D. Today's existing is obviously a new picture, right? And then the cumulative itself is another new picture because we're projecting out another 10 years beyond what the original model would have projected with the MND. So to answer your question in short, yes, we do feel it was appropriate. Any other questions?
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
And with that, staff recommends that you approve the 2-year extension of time request in reliance on the previously adopted mitigated negative declaration and modify conditions of approval subject to the findings found in the staff report. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Chris? Thank you. Would the applicant like to get up and?
Good morning, I'm Steve Paterson. I'm the applicant. This project has been a kind of a challenge to work it to the point that it is today. One of the slowdowns that we ran into was with PG&E because they were dealing with all the fires. And so getting joint trench agreements and right-of-ways and things like that through their legal department and through their staff and engineering probably delayed us 7 or 8 months. And then it caused all the other utilities to wait until PG&E was done. So we kind of got slowed down just due to external circumstances. The project's ready to go. I'm not a home builder. I'm a retail developer. I originally bought this property to develop the retail parcel, but the economy changed and that became not practical. So my goal has been to try to get this site prepared to the point where a builder could come in, pull the permit to do the site development, and go ahead and build homes. And we had a little bit of an issue last fall where most of the home builders pulled in their horns because they saw some dark clouds on the horizon, and they have now since reemerged, and we're starting to get a little bit of interest on the property. But I've spent considerable time and resources doing all the offsites, mitigating and paying for all the on-site environmental, getting all the on-site construction plans through the approval process, and ready for a home builder to go down to the desk and pull a permit. So I feel like I haven't been sitting on my hands. I've spent a lot of money, spent a lot of time. It costs me a lot of money to carry this property every month, so it's like I've got a built-in incentive to try to get a builder to come in and get it done. So I'm just asking for just one extension in hopes of being able to get this thing across the finish line.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
With that, we'll open it up to the public for comments or.
Good morning, Sandy Harris. Appreciate Steve's comments, and I know it is a burden for developers to get projects started and finished. But all that talk about the traffic kind of goes over my head, but I know that when this was put through, the traffic study they used was flawed. And we, the Granite Bay Community Association, hired a traffic engineer who did a study for us and found a lot of flaws in the intersections and the traffic study that this was based on. And that's a concern. I read the notice and it says the Planning Commission is to review these projects and see if there's been any changes. There have been changes to the environment. And traffic there is very bad, and it only has one access onto Eureka Road, which also feeds the high school. And all of the Greyhound subdivision, they're not going to be able to make left-hand turns on Douglas, so they're going to be coming down to Eureka Road. And also, I know there was flooding this winter. Now, I know Chris said that the pipes were clogged, and I just question, when were they opened up? Was it during the rainy season? Because it was flooding during the rainy season. Those are just a few of my comments. Thank you.
Sandy, have a question?
Don't run away.
Chrissy, when you contracted a study that determined that there was some flaws, did they use the same methodology as the county did when they did
We
their
had
original-
that study done right after this project, so, and I'm not that familiar, like I said, I'm not a traffic engineer. But I know they pointed out there were some flaws. They didn't even look at, I believe it was Eureka and Auburn Folsom intersection, and they used Roseville City standards for the project, and it's actually in Placer County for that Roseville Parkway. And since then, we've had a lot of projects approved on Sierra College, and the Chabad recently was approved for a lot larger than what it is now. And the Greyhound subdivision went from 13 lots to 55. And I know when Neil, for his project, Corey Ridge, he had to do a traffic EIR study for his little project way up on Berg. And this one did not do the traffic EIR. They just had the MND. So it doesn't seem like they put enough study into the traffic.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion of this. And Clayton, question for you, if you would, please. Kind of go over, if you would, go over again, please. Your comments relating to the traffic and what part of this is to be considered and what isn't, and
Sure. So I guess the main item that you're looking at is to determine whether there's been a change in circumstances that would have been grounds for denying the original application. So that's I guess the main thing that you're looking at in determining whether to grant this extension. The second part of that has to do with the environmental review portion. And that's kind of what I went over before. And that is basically that there is a mitigated negative declaration that was approved with this project in 2016. And under CEQA, once you have an approved environmental review, then you would only need to look into that further if there have been changes to the project. There haven't been changes to the project because this is only an extension of time being requested. There is one caveat to that, and that is if there is significant new information that is provided. In that instance, then you would have to look at that new information. And these concerns about traffic were raised at the time of the initial approvals, so they wouldn't fall into that category of new information. So I guess that's the short of it.
thank you. Comments from Commissioner? Questions?
I have a question for council and for staff. Could you clarify that on whether the study was predicated on City of Roseville standards, and if so, why that was?
I think Stephanie Holloway again. I think what Sandy was referring to was related to Sierra College Boulevard. So the city-county line on Sierra College Boulevard kind of wanders around in the right-of-way. There's a number of intersections where the county has two legs of the intersection, the city has two, or some combination of that, right? So I think we have in kind of recent history used the City of Roseville standards specifically for the Sierra College Douglas Boulevard. With some of the more current projects that we're processing right now, that determination of using the city's standard has been evaluated by staff and determined to not be valid. Our Granite Bay Community Plan does make findings of level of service at that location, and to also kind of add some history. The county actually 3 of the legs of that intersection are within the county's jurisdiction. So the city does maintain the signal there and the signal timing. So it's a real, it's kind of a gray area for us where I think historically we have used the city standard there, but the county with recent projects has made a determination that is more appropriate and actually more conservative for us to use the county's standard. So,
Right, because Stephanie, the city's standards are much more rigorous and exacting than the county standards.
the city standard actually it has a little bit more leniency in the amount of additional traffic that can be added to an intersection that may be failing. Our standard has less leniency, and so we feel like by using the county standard at that location that we actually are being a little bit more conservative. So that's specific to Douglas and Sierra College. Obviously, there's other intersections and segments on Sierra College that have that similar gray kind of gray area, and so Greyhawk 3 was processed with the city's standard, however.
I'm not criticizing that. I just was asking for your elaboration.
Yeah.
And I do think that you answered the question, so thank you.
Okay, great.
Let me see, yeah, I think you just said it. On this project in 2015 in the study, did you use the city standard?
We did.
You did?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. For Sierra College, not for the, there's obviously other intersections that are in the study, other segments, but on Sierra College we did use the city's standard for level of service.
Okay, so I'm still puzzling a little bit. There's a private study that says that the county study was flawed. Is that correct?
Right.
But they didn't use the same standards that the county did in 2015.
The study that Sandy is referencing, it was a contract, I believe, that they had with MRO, a traffic consultant. It was after the date of approval of the Greyhawk project that they hired MRO to kind of look at and evaluate the analysis that we had done. They raised some concerns over that study and over the methodology. Met with the county and we agreed to kind of undertake an update of the traffic model, an update of our methodology, and that's something that we're still in the process of. We're still working with the community. We've done the new traffic study, the new traffic analysis. Obviously, there's new findings associated with that, and so we're kind of working through that at this point. So, but the MRO letter and those concerns were raised officially through the Granite Bay Association after Greyhawk 3 approval.
Okay, and it used new information?
Say that again?
Did their study use new information after approval 15?
I wouldn't say they used new information. I believe the MRO analysis was just an evaluation of the work that the county had done and our traffic model and our assumptions. I don't know that they used new information. It was more of an analysis of what had been performed.
So if they're saying it was the county's methodology was flawed, what was flawed about it? Is that a fact?
They raised concerns over our use of some methodology that essentially is, it has evolved over time in the industry, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds with it, but when we look at, the traffic analysis, there are certain standards that are put out through the Highway Capacity Manual. That Highway Capacity Manual is changing over time, and so as those changes occur, cities and counties can choose to adopt the new standards. We were using, I think, a 2000 HCM, Highway Capacity Manual standard at the time. That standard has changed, and that was one of the main critiques, is that standard should be updated. Well, in order for us to update that standard, a new traffic model needed to be commissioned and performed, and that's the process that we're down. So in the sense that we were using an older standard, I don't know if that's a flaw. That's probably a critique of our methodology.
Well, I think if in 2015 you were using the best practice that you knew at that time, then I'm questioning why that would be a flaw. If a new standard needs to be developed or used, right, then why would what happened in 2015 be a flaw? don't understand it. I don't think so, I guess.
Yes, I think there's a question of, the interpretation of flawed, right? In our mind, the methodology that we used at the time was the best tool. Like I stated before, it was the best tool that the county had. It was what our traffic model was based on for Granite Bay at that time. So we used the best tool we had. Subsequent to that, we have heard some concerns and have adjusted.
So I think you just answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any others?
As the only former city commissioner in this, as the only former city commissioner in this room and on this dais, on this commission, I can speak to the rigorous standards that the city of Roseville has, and I see no problems with the methodology whatsoever.
Thank you. We'll open it up to, I guess, a motion if somebody has one and wants to make one.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I'd like to move that we approve the 2-year extension of time requested and reliant on the previously adopted mitigated negative declaration and modified conditions of approval subject to the findings found in the staff.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Sue.
I have a motion by Mr. Nader, a second by Mr. Herzog, so a vote from Mr. Cannon.
If we could, before we vote, I believe there is clarification needed. Condition of approval, just to make sure.
So on the condition number 1, talks about on May 23rd, the planning commission action or approved. It should say May 9th. So just one correction on number 1.
Okay.
Is
So
that the
move.
modified conditions we're talking?
So move.
We still have a second on that?
Second, yeah.
Okay, so a vote from Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Mr. Sevison.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We will now, I guess, get to our 10:05 item.
Item, Chair.
Yes.
So staff is asking for a continuance. This is a Red Dog Chairlift Modification. The item was not properly noticed. There was a noise exception that was left out of the notice. So what we would like to do is notice that properly and continue that to a date and time certain on May 23rd. And I would suggest 10:05 a.m. and the Planning Commission clerk can confirm that.
So move.
Have a motion?
Second.
Second. Roll call, please.
I'm sorry, the motion was made by,
Mr. Nader?
okay, and the second?
Mr. Cannon?
Thank you. So a vote from Mr. Cannon,
Yes.
Mr. Herzog,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Nader,
Yes.
Mr. Sevison,
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Our 10:15 item, Cabral Ranch.
Good morning. I think it's my turn now. My name is Alex Fish with the Planning Services Division. The project before you today is a request for approval of a modification to the Cabral Ranch Subdivision project. The request includes approval of a 2-year extension of time as well as approval of variances to conform the revised tentative map to the overall development plan as previously approved. I'll detail those issues as I go through my presentation. So this here's the project site. It's located on the west side of Cookriolo Road, about 200 yards south of the intersection of Vineyard Road and Cookriolo Road in the Dry Creek West Placer Community Plan area. The site is designated rural low-density residential, 1 to 2.3 acre minimum in the community plan, and it is zoned residential single-family, combining a minimum building site of 40,000 square feet with a planned development designation of 1 unit per acre. This here is the presently approved tentative map. As I mentioned, the applicant is requesting approval of a modification in order to reduce the length of this on-site roadway. I'll show you that in the next slide, but we'll go over the current approved map scenario first. And that reduced roadway length would avoid the need to acquire a portion of this property to the west in order to construct this little portion of the cul-de-sac bulb. The modification also includes a request for approval of variances to reduce the net minimum parcel size of lots 1 through 5 from 40,000 square feet to about 36,428 square feet up to 39,125 square feet. That is an issue that is brought to bear by virtue of how the county calculates minimum parcel size on properties that are less than 5 acres in size, where we reduce easement areas for roadways and major utilities. Retention of the easement also necessitates approval of a variance to the front setback created by that easement. The easement is located along the north property boundary and presently exists at 20 feet wide. And so if that easement is retained, technically there is a front setback requirement of 75 feet to the center line of that easement. The proposal is to reduce that setback to 10 feet from the edge of easement for single-story structures, 20 feet from edge of easement for structures that are 2 or more stories. And lastly, the project proposes to construct a 6-foot-tall solid wood good neighbor privacy fence along that easement. That'll make everybody happy, whether it's the folks on site here or the folks using the driveway to access their property, and keep them have adequate privacy separation. And then the last item I should mention, as I said, there is a request for approval of a 2-year extension of time. Give you a little background on the project. In December 2008, the Planning Commission first approved a tentative map for this project. At that time, it included 12 single-family lots, essentially in the same configuration that you see here. And in August of 2013, your commission approved a modification to incorporate a gated entry. In December 2017, the commissioner approved a first 2-year extension of time following expiration of automatic extensions granted by the state during the economic downturn. As approved, the project would construct the private on-site roadway as well as dry and wet utilities that fall in the roadway alignment, including drainage improvements and stormwater treatment improvements. And then, of course, there would be widening of Cookriolo Road and construction of the project entry features, which include a landscaped earth and noise barrier and a decomposed granite trail that travels across the frontage here. So this is the proposed modified tentative map, and you can see, as I had previously described, the lotting pattern is essentially unchanged. There are some slight modifications over here to these lots as a consequence of the reduced roadway cul-de-sac bulb length. I already mentioned there would be a 6-foot-tall solid wood good neighbor privacy fence constructed along the south boundary of the easement, and the minor deviations to the county code that would result. I'll note for the commission here, I did have about a 15-20 minute conversation with the adjoining property owner last week. We went through the modifications in detail, and she affirmed for me that she and her husband were in agreement with the modifications and that they effectively achieved their objectives as far as how they would like their property to be maintained under the existing conditions where they have this access and will continue to use it. It was previously anticipated that they would abandon this access in favor of gaining access off of this roadway, but that has since gone out of favor, I think is the best way to describe it. They would not have access to this roadway. They would maintain their existing access under this modified condition. This is a sewer access, a paved access to a sewer manhole. I already went over the extension of time, but I will note that given the challenging economic conditions facing all development projects during the downturn and the modifications to the project that the proponent has had to incorporate to facilitate a mutually agreeable development scenario with the adjoining property owner, the Development Review Committee has determined that the applicant has been diligent in pursuing implementation of this project and that the grant of this second extension of time is warranted. And similar to the Greyhawk 3 project, the applicant has already secured some of the mitigations for biological resources that will be required in order to carry out the project. So with that, the Development Review Committee recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the addendum to the mitigated negative declaration that was prepared for this project, approve the vesting tentative map modification based on the findings in staff's report, approve the 3 variances as described in staff's report to reduce the net minimum lot size, reduce the setback created by that retained easement, and then incorporate an allowance for a 6-foot tall solid wood fence. And lastly, approve a 2-year extension of time request based on staff's findings. I'm available for any questions. We do, of course, have the applicant and the applicant's engineer available for questions as well.
Alex, could you go back to the map?
Certainly.
That's what you said, it's a 20-foot easement across the top for the access to the back parcel.
This is an existing easement that has a paved driveway.
It's paved
presently today.
And is the only access on that easement for that rear parcel? Because there's other parcels above that, but it's just for that.
You are correct. None of those off-site parcels have access rights to that easement.
Anything else?
Let me see, could you go over the, well, I guess the variance or changes in the setback again?
Certainly. So under a scenario where, this is not uncommon in our rural parts of the county where a lot of the development happens by parcel map, where you may have a driveway passing over a parcel. By virtue of how our ordinance is constructed, that is considered a front. Even if the property doesn't take access from it, it is still considered a front. In this instance, none of these 5 lots would take access from that easement. They would take access from the roadway, but nonetheless, it is considered a front. So in order to maintain the anticipated development pattern of the project site, where these are rear yards, not front yards, there's an incorporation of the variance request so that they can still have the ability to construct typical accessory backyard things like pools, cabanas, pool houses, a guest house, something that's accessory to the principal use of the single-family residence.
Okay, and I guess the 20 foot before included the road easement?
Yes, and that exists presently. So that's there was a real estate agreement in the past that anticipated that easement would be abandoned in favor of this parcel gaining access off this road.
Okay.
That has gone out of favor.
Okay, so that's the rationale for a change.
Correct.
Commissioners, anybody else? Guess we have the applicant want an opportunity to speak?
Good morning, members of the commission. Brad Sherhall, TLA Engineering and Planning, 1504 Eureka Road, Suite 110, Roseville, California. Here this morning representing Cabral Ranch LLC, and actually here also in conjunction with my friend and sort of business partner, Tony Gallus Incorporated. I'm representing us this morning. We wanted to just thank staff, especially Phil Franz and Alex Fish, for working through this with us. It's been a challenge for my client to get through this, and of course we've been around the bend on this a few times. One of the reasons for the extension, and Alex did a pretty good job of explaining this, was that we actually have improvement plans for the previous work, and things went south, and so we now have to do improvement plans for the new work, and that's one of the biggest reasons for the time extension. So it sounds like you've asked a lot of the very relevant questions, and we could answer anything else probably that you might have for us. With that, I'll go sit down unless you have something for us.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank
Good,
you.
thank you.
Are there any members of the public who would like to address the commission on this issue? Seeing none, close that off and come back to the commissioners. motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please, Sue.
I have a motion by Mr. Nader, a second by Mr. Cannon. Vote from Mr. Cannon, please.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Thank you.
I would further move that we approve the vesting tentative map modification based on the findings in the staff report.
Second.
Motion and 2 seconds here.
So are we going with Mr. Cannon or Mr. Sevison?
Oh, let Larry
Take
have a
a
turn
turn,
here.
toss a coin.
Okay. I have a first by Mr. Nader and a second by Mr. Sevison, so a vote for Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Thank you.
I would further move that we approve the variance request to reduce the net minimum parcel size on lot 1 through 5 from 40,000 square feet in the RSAG B40 zoning designation to sizes ranging from 36,428 to 39,125 square feet, and reduce the front setback from 75 feet from center line of the travelway to 10 feet from the edge of easement based on the findings of the staff report and included in the recommendations of approval. That would be, do I need to say something about findings?
We have findings in there.
I guess it's, the findings are mentioned anyway.
So we have a motion. We have a
Second.
Second by Mr. Cannon.
I have a first by Mr. Nader, a second by Mr. Cannon, so a vote for Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Thank you.
Further move that we approve a 2-year extension of time request based on the findings in the staff report.
Second.
Motion and a second.
I have a first by Mr. Nader, a second by Mr. Sevison, so vote for Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's up our 10:30 item, the Quarry Ridge Professional Office Park.
Good morning, Jennifer Bias, Planning Services Division, here to present this item, Quarry Ridge Professional Park. What's being proposed here, we're looking for a recommendation for the Board of Supervisors on Granite Bay Community Plan amendments to adjust the site from a low-density residential to a commercial designation, as well as a proposed modification to language in the community plan regarding the setback along Douglas on the north side. Also proposing to rezone the site from single-family residential 20,000 square feet to a office professional with a design review designation. They're requesting a tentative parcel map for 4 lots, as well as a site design review. The project site is located 3.23 acre site is located in Granite Bay along Douglas Boulevard at Douglas and Berg. To the south is the Quarry Ponds commercial development. To the east is a House of Worship Fellowship Church. To the north is residential. And to the west is residential as well as a vacant lot. The site is currently zoned single-family residential, minimum building site of 20,000 square feet. This is a site photograph from the east end of the project along Douglas looking northwest. As you can see, the site is relatively level but slopes upward with a small knoll on the west end and is comprised of oak woodlands and grassland. An existing site at the intersection of Douglas and Berg looking northeast. And here is a site photograph from the Quarry Ponds intersection looking at the site. This is an existing site plan that's being proposed for the tentative map that would create 4 parcels. What's being proposed with each parcels is 4 different buildings. The first building would be a general office building with then 3 additional medical buildings ranging from 3,200 square feet to 5,500 square feet. Vehicle access would be proposed along Berg Street. And with the parking lot being proposed on the north end of the site, the driveway would come in here. There would be a turnaround here. This is also proposed to be a gated commercial development. The gates would be open during business hours, but closed when the offices were not open. Pedestrian access is proposed off of Berg as well as Douglas Boulevard. The project is proposed to be phased. Shown in pink would be the first phase, and blue would be the second phase, with phase 1 including grading, and we'll go over that more in detail, with building 1 being the first proposed development on the project. The grading plan that's been proposed, as you can see, retains most of the site and is considered the existing topography. There will be some material transported on site, but the west side of the project will be stepped down. You can see the cross section here. There's 10-foot steps down along here with these lines depicting the step downs for the building, and then ultimately leveling out with the existing topography for buildings between buildings 3 and 4. Again, the grading also took into consideration the residential uses to the north, and are proposing a masonry wall between the residential development and the commercial development, and the views would be similar to what it exists today with the existing and proposed grading and topography. Tree removal on site, there are 29 trees that exist on the site. They are proposing to remove 14 of the trees and retain 15 of the trees. They're also proposing landscaping with the development, the standard landscaping between the residential as well as the commercial development to provide fast-growing screening trees, as well as parking lot shading, and then landscaping along the Douglasburg frontage that's consistent with the community plan. The next series of slides are the illustratives proposed that depict the architectural renderings. This would be a view of the project along the Douglas corridor and from the quarry ponds. This is also a rendering of Building A and the design. Again, here's a rendering of Building A and the design. I'll go through these rather quickly. Building B, the architecture and rendering would be very similar. They're concepts. Building C, again, very similar concepts. And Building D. Proposed with this plan, again, was a community plan amendment. The community plan amendment, if you're looking for the exact language, is on page 8 of your staff report. But really, this is addressing a 75-foot setback, building setback along the Douglas corridor that was added with the community plan. And depicted here, I know it's really hard to see. I do have a bigger version. If we want to look more closely at this, we can. But depicted here is showing a blue line, which is 70 foot from the center line of the travelway, which is what we're requesting along Douglas of new projects, the dedication. And then from that is the red line, which is this building setback, 75 feet from the center line of the travelway. This is contained within the community plan along the design and circulation section. So this project is proposing to amend the community plan to add some additional language in that section under the community plan to clarify that there are some standards that need to be met for visual buffers, including landscaping and architectural, as well as on-site features that can be considered for that setback to be adjusted by a hearing body. This language is really kind of akin to a performance standard, so it's really consistent with the community plan. There's also language in the community plan that guides that these are standards that are visions for the development, but that on-site development should consider the adjacent, the topography, keeping all of the trees, the landscape and architect. So the community plan really does allow for this. We just wanted there to be real clarification on the north side of the Douglas Boulevard, how you might go about achieving that 75-foot setback or a reduction to that 75-foot setback for a standard. And this came up especially at the MAC meeting. There were some questions about it, and I didn't have all the numbers at the MAC meeting. And one of the questions that came up at the MAC meeting was how many parcels along the Douglas Boulevard are not developed. And so I went back and we ran this analysis with GIS using this. And currently along the north side of Douglas Boulevard, there are 6 parcels, including this parcel. 2 of the parcels, and I think I can point them out, parcel 1, this is really hard to see. 1 starts here and goes to here. And just so you are oriented, this is Kings Gate, and then that goes all the way down to Douglas Plaza, which is just to the west of Barton Road. So this segment of Douglas is really the only parcels that we found would be affected by any changes we made here. Parcel 1 is owned by an HOA and was part of open space retained after a residential development. Parcels 2 and 3 are existing vacant that are the zoned single-family residential. I think back in 2006 there was a Granite Bay Medical Offices project that's still on hold on that parcel. Parcel 4 here, or the depicted here, is our project that we're talking about here. Parcel 5 is east of the Fellowship Church, is zoned residential and is currently vacant. And then this parcel 6 is owned by an HOA and is likely been retained as part of, again, open space required for a residential development. There's also been questions about can't there be a variance granted for this, and just to clarify, this is a community plan standard and we don't grant variances for community plan standards. That would be a variance would be something that there would be size, shape, topography, all of which we think are here on the site, but that would be something we would grant relief from the zoning ordinance. Because this is a standard that's set up in a community plan policy, we went with the going and adding additional language that would provide the flexibility for the hearing bodies to make decisions about projects moving forward. For this project, there was also an environmental impact report that has been published per the CEQA guidelines. In 2017, there was an initial study performed on this. Of the 23 sections that we look at environmentally, 13 were considered no impact or less than significant, and 7 were considered less than significant with mitigation, which only left 3, which was noise, transportation and circulation, and then cumulative impacts that were addressed through a draft EIR. The draft EIR has been prepared and circulated for public comment and review and is included in your package, as well as a response to comments that were received. The EIR found that there were no significant environmental impacts proposed with this project. Again, there was a MAC meeting held as an information item. The MAC really strongly supported this project in 2016, and then again in 2019. In April, we were all there for an action item. The MAC did recommend approval of this project with the caveat of trying to direct staff to find an alternative solution to the setback in the community plan rather than amending the community plan. So that was their recommendation. We've also received 2 public correspondence on this, and you should have those from Cheryl Burkham and Larissa Berry, and both of those were regarding the proposed community plan amendment. And hopefully my explanation on that has addressed some of their questions that they have asked you also. With that, I will pause and take questions.
Question? I have one. We've got 4 total buildings. 1 is designated for general office. The other 3 are medical. My guess is that the medical is considered a more intense type use. Or no? I mean, could those ones that are designated medical eventually wind up being general office?
They could ultimately. We have a site design review, again, that is putting them as medical at this point, but as they get built out, they could come in and propose something different. Again, everybody can always, but we would have to look at a review, what was approved, what the EIR analyzed, how many parking spaces are there based on what would be developed.
Okay.
But right now they're put in the site design review agreement as medical, and they're meeting the parking standards and all the requirements for medical uses.
Thank you. Like you're off. Would the applicant like to speak, please?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Tim Tarrin. I'm here on behalf of Neil Deerhoff and the Deerhoff Family Trust. I'd like to start today by thanking the staff. We've had this project going for a long time, and it's not been easy to get to where we are, but they've been very patient and very persistent and very supportive when we've had problems, and we've had problems, but they've always been willing to sit down and try to work through them, and we very much appreciate that. I don't have a lot to say today because we support all the conditions of approval and the staff recommendation, so we don't really have anything to argue about per se, but I do want to offer just a couple of clarifications. Chairman raised one just now. I was going to address that. We have asked for medical uses for the remaining 3 buildings because our perception is those are more intense. We wanted to make sure it was evaluated at that more intensive use. But they could obviously come in as general office, and if they did, we would go through the process that Jen just described to you. I also want to just comment on the design of the buildings. Building A, you saw probably from the rendering, is pretty dramatic given the elevation and the landscaping and the treatment on that corner. This is a building that Neil, who is here today, along with our engineer, Kent Baker, in case you have any questions, that Neil himself is going to occupy for his family business. And so it's going to, he really hasn't spared much when it comes to this building. Its materials are really the first rate. The design has been really carefully attended to, as has the landscaping features and all the other features of the project. So it's really going to be a great looking project. I just also wanted to mention 14 trees are going to be taken out, but actually 2 of them are already gone because they blew down over the past couple of winters. So there's really only 12 left. Those are found to be, some of them found to be diseased and otherwise needed to come down. We will need to go through and get a tree permit for those in any event, so we'll be doing that. Now, I'd like to just mention a couple of things about the community plan amendment. So one might ask, looking at the buildings, why didn't you just push the buildings back towards the residential and put the parking lot in between the buildings and Douglas? And maybe you would have gotten that 75-foot setback or close. Well, one of the things Neil did before he even started this project is he went around and personally visited with every neighbor in the back, a couple of times actually. And one of the things that they said they wanted, in addition to a masonry wall and the screen trees, is that they wanted the buildings pushed farther towards Douglas, and they wanted the parking lot in the back as a buffer between buildings, and so that people wouldn't be looking towards their residences. So that's why we designed it the way we did, in part. The other reason we pushed the buildings forward was because by doing that, we could actually save more trees. And the oak trees, some of them are really nice, some of them are not so nice, the ones that are coming out. And frankly, if we had done a residential project, we would not have been able to save virtually any of them. But we pushed the building, we wanted to preserve as many trees as we could, and that pushing the buildings more towards Douglas actually facilitated preserving trees. So there were some good reasons to do that, which then is a good segue. Well, why then should you support this community plan amendment request? It's for this very reason, because the way it's written right now, it's kind of one size fits all, and it doesn't allow you to actually look at the particulars of each site and say, what's the best thing to do for given all the circumstances? And frankly, if you look at the 2 letters you got, they don't talk about the site specifics. They just talk about, in concept, why you shouldn't change the community plan, because you should just have a standard. You still have a standard, but it does give you an opportunity to look and say, I like that. that works better than this. And all things being considered, that's the way we want to go. So it's a really sensible, fair thing to do. And actually, I think it's very good public policy. That's it. Happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you for your consideration. We hope you support the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Questions, commissioners?
Thank you.
Thank you. Open it up to the public for comments.
Sandy Harris, Granite Bay. I'm here to support the project. Neil has worked very closely with the community.
Somebody know CPR? I'm sorry.
I do this when there's a good project coming in and it makes sense. And he did work with the neighbors. There's a nice residential development right behind it. And I know right from the start, he was right there listening to their concerns. He came to the Granite Bay Community Association. He's been to MAC several times. And I ran into him at the bank one morning and after he started this project, and I said, can't you get all those illegal signs off that property? Because, Jeff, you know that corner's always a mess with illegal signs. Boy, they were all gone. He cleaned that lot up, took the trash off, and it's looked nice without any other development on it, just cleaning it up. So we're in support of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Is there anybody else? Seeing none, we'll close off the public comment and bring it back to the commission.
Well, given that Sandy's going to support it, I don't see how we can't. Let's see. I'll go ahead and throw it out there. I would like to make a recommendation that we take action to recommend the following to the Board of Supervisors. Number one, certify the Quarry Ridge Project final environmental impact report. Do I really need to read the number? Okay, SCH number 20170922027, prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act and adopt the Mitigation Monitoring Reporting Program, attachment F, supported by the findings contained within the staff report.
Second. You misread the number. Read it again.
We have a motion and a second.
I have a first by Mr. Nader, a second by Mr. Sevison. So a vote from Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Mr. Sevison.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would further move that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors adopt a resolution to amend the Granite Bay Community Plan land use diagram and text to the Granite Bay Community Plan Attachment C, supported by the findings contained within the staff report.
Do you have a second? Second. Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
I have a first by Mr. Nader, a second by Mr. Sevison. Vote from Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Mr. Sevison.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would further move that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors adopting an ordinance to rezone the Quarry Ridge Project site, attachment D, supported by the findings contained within the staff report.
Second? Motion and a second.
It's a first by Mr. Nader, a second by Mr. Sevison. A vote from Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Mr. Sevison.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Thank you.
Further move that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors approve the Quarry Ridge Project tentative parcel map with recommended conditions of approval, attachment D, supported by the findings contained within the staff report.
Second?
And I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
First from Mr. Nader, second from Mr. Sevison. Vote from Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Mr. Sevison.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Thank you.
Finally, I would move that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors to approve a site design review agreement as shown in attachment D, supported by the findings contained in the staff.
That actually should be attachment D instead of
Okay, attachment.
Well,
D.
that changes
Is that-
everything.
Did you say D?
D, as in
D,
dog.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So move.
Second.
Motion and a second.
First from Mr. Nader, a second from Mr. Sevison. Vote from Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think that wraps it up.
I guess we're done.
Thank you all for coming out today and participating, and we'll see you next meeting.
Thanks for the warning.